Hey there. Today is the 23rd of August and I'm going to show you how to create flexible tile grids in CSS. So here's a demo of what I'm going to show you. You can see that we've got a set of tiles. There's 4 columns right now and 3 rows, and you can see that it's a fluid grid, so the gaps or gutters in between each tile expand. You can see that the right and left are flush up against the browser. They're not the gap isn't showing up on the right hand side, which is really important. And you can see that when the browser gets too big, it'll reflow the tiles. So this is a really common pattern that people want to build, and I'm going to show you how to do it without using one of those CSS frameworks that everybody seems to be into. Okay, so you can obviously apply this to other things than lists, but list is a really great example. I'm also going to show you samples using less CSS. Less is a really cool helper for making your style sheet simpler. It's not necessary to get this to work. You would just have to pre-calculate each primary state of your grid. So you'd have to calculate the percentages for a 6 column grid, a 4 column grid, and a 3 column grid, and then hard code them into your CSS if you didn't want to use less. Okay, so let's take a look at the HTML. So you can see it's really simple. We're including a styles.less, which is seen below, and you can see we're just including the less.js. We've got a unordered list of list items. I've put the span inside because I wanted to put a border on it. You can't put the border on the list item using this solution because that will actually increase the width of the item by a couple pixels, which will throw off the grid. So you need to nest something inside and put your borders on that. And then let's take a look at the CSS. So we've got just some boring stuff up here to show the border, and then I'll show you this columns function after. That's really the meat of it, but you can see that we've got a set of list items that are floated to the left, and then a mix-in called columns6, and this is on all list items. Then on every 6th item, that's what this nth child 6n plus 6 means, we're setting the margin right to 0. And then we're basically doing the same thing, but using @media queries. When the max width hits 980 pixels, we switch the columns to 4. We actually have to go to the every 6th item and reset it as well, otherwise they would have a margin right of 0. And then we set every 4th item to have a margin right of 0. And then finally, at our smallest resolution, we drop down to 3 columns, and then every 3rd item has a margin right of 0. So obviously, if 6, 4, and 3 didn't work for you, you could change that to whatever you wanted, but that worked well for me because I had 12 items. So now let's take a look at what columns is actually doing. So columns is setting a width property, a margin right, and a margin bottom. So how are we calculating that? Well, we're passing in a set of elements. So that could be 6, 4, or 3. And first of all, we calculate how many margins there's going to be. So there's only going to be one less than the number of elements, because obviously we don't want a margin on the right. So then we calculate the margin percentage. So we look at our margin width, which is a global. We want it to be 2%. And we calculate that as a percentage of 100%. And then we get the total margin width. We find the 2% times, the total margin width is 2% times the number of margins. And using that, we then calculate the element width. So we take 100% and minus our total margin width, and this is all percentages that we're working with. We divide that by the number of elements, and then we divide that result by 100%, and that gives us each individual element width. We then convert that into a percentage by timesing it by 100, and we've got our margin width, our margin right, and our margin bottom. And if you actually look at what is getting output, you can see that this is 15% width, 2%, and 2%. So we could have hard-coded that ourselves pretty easily. That's actually what the CSS file is generating, but it's just easier to use less. The reason being, again, that the next smaller increment is 23.5%, and again, still 2% margins, and the next down from that is 32%. So this can get really complicated if your base size is really weird or funky, or you have a number of grids. So just adding it as a helper is really nice. But really, again, the meat of it is the idea that we're using the end child to control the margin, and we're using at media queries and percentage widths. And that's it. See you later.